The year is 1925. Paris is alive with the noise of reconstruction, ambition, and money. A man in a tailored government suit steps out of a black car on the Champ de Mars. He moves like someone who belonged everywhere. Beside him walks André Poisson, a businessman from the provinces, a little nervous, a little too eager to please. Above them, the Eiffel Tower rises into the pale May sky. 7,300 tons of iron that the whole world knows and no one owns. Not yet. The man in the suit gestures up at it with the casual authority of someone who deals in large things. Poisson nods. He has already decided to trust this man. He decided that before he even got in the car. He's about to pay approximately 70,000 francs to buy the Eiffel Tower. And the man in the suit is going to take his money, cross the border into Austria, and never think about André Poisson again. His name is Victor Lustig, and this is the most audacious con in history. Victor Lustig was born on January 4, 1890 in Hostinec, a small town in Bohemia, then part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, now part of the Czech Republic. His father was the mayor. His father was also a brutal man who used his fists on his children with the same casual authority he used everything else. The town knew. No one said anything. That was the first lesson Victor learned. Appearances protect you, status protects you, and the gap between what people see and what is actually true, that gap is a door if you know how to open it. He was brilliant in school, effortlessly so. He had an ear for language that bordered on supernatural. By his early 20s, he would speak 5 of them fluently: French, English, German, Italian, Czech. Not just functionally, fluently, natively. He could walk into a room as a Frenchman and walk out as an Austrian count, and no one would question the seam. Language wasn't just communication for Victor Lustig. It was camouflage. By his teens, he was already slipping into aristocratic aliases. Count this, Baron that. The titles cost nothing to claim and opened every door. He began running card scams in Vienna, small at first, then more elaborate. Those who encountered him at the card table in those early years would later say the same thing. He'd make a deck of cards do anything but talk. Before the First World War, Lustig had discovered his ideal hunting ground, the transatlantic ocean liner. The great ships crossing from Europe to America were floating casinos of wealth and boredom, the perfect conditions for a man of his particular skills. His marks were wealthy passengers with time on their hands and money they hadn't worked hard enough to respect. He moved through first class like a ghost, reading people. A widow traveling alone. A businessman who drinks a little too much. A young man with new money and the insecurity that comes with it. Lustig could see a person's weakness the way a doctor reads an X-ray. Clinical, precise. He ran investment cons, impersonation cons. He once posed as a Broadway producer and talked a group of investors into funding a show that didn't exist. Then the war came and the ocean liner stopped. Lustig adapted. He always adapted. After the armistice, he relocated to the United States, where he invented his masterpiece. He called it the Romanian box. It was a mahogany box, beautifully constructed, fitted with internal rollers and a series of chemical baths. Lustig would present it to a mark with great solemnity, the tone of a man revealing a secret he shouldn't. The box, he explained quietly, used radium to duplicate banknotes. You fed in a genuine bill. 6 hours later, the box produced a perfect copy. He had a demonstration bill ready. It always worked. Because inside the box, before the meeting, Lustig had loaded 2 or 3 genuine counterfeit bills that would slowly feed out through the rollers over the next 6 hours. Long after the contract was signed and the money had changed hands, he sold the Romanian box for $20,000 to $30,000 per unit. By the time each mark returned with fury and a lawyer, Lustig was in another city, in another suit, with another name. He had previously even attempted a version of this territorial audacity in London, trying to sell Tower Bridge to a credulous investor. That one hadn't taken. London wasn't quite right, but Paris. Paris was a city that still believed in the grandeur of things. Paris would be perfect. It began with a newspaper and a hotel room. May 1925. Lustig is staying at a good hotel in Paris, as he always stays at good hotels. He reads the French papers every morning. It is a habit, intelligence gathering disguised as leisure. On this particular morning, a story catches his eye. It is about the Eiffel Tower, not a story of triumph, a story of decay. The article described the tower's problems in practical terms that would have been invisible to most readers but glittered like gold to Victor Lustig. The iron structure required 60 tons of paint every 7 years just to hold back the rust. The city's maintenance budget was strained. Attendance had plateaued. And then the line that stopped him entirely. Some city officials had quietly begun to wonder whether the tower, built as a temporary exhibition structure for the 1889 World's Fair, never intended to be permanent, might one day need to come down. He set the paper down. He looked out the window in the direction of the tower. The Eiffel Tower had been built by Gustave Eiffel, who had spent the last decades of his life fighting to keep it standing. In 1923, Gustave Eiffel had died. The tower's greatest champion was gone. The structure that half of Paris had called an eyesore when it went up was now rusting quietly, beloved and expensive, and nobody's responsibility. If Victor Lustig was not the kind of man who waited for inspiration to fully form before he moved, he was already writing a list. Everything about what he did next was designed to produce a specific feeling in specific people. He hired a forger, a man who knew how to make paper do what paper shouldn't. What he needed was stationery. Official stationery from the Ministère des Postes et Télégraphes, the Ministry of Posts and Telegraphs, the French government body with nominal oversight of the tower at that time. He needed it to look so correct that the sight of it would silence any instinct to question what came next. He got a government access card to match, then he identified his targets, not at random, methodically. He researched the top 5 scrap metal dealers in Paris, established businessmen, men of reputation, men who would know the value of 7,300 tons of iron, men who could make a deal of this size without needing to ask their banks for permission. He sent them each a personal letter on the ministry stationery. The letters were brief and formal. You have been selected to attend a confidential meeting regarding a government matter of significant commercial opportunity. The location, the Hôtel de Crillon, and one of the most prestigious hotels in Paris, positioned on the Place de la Concorde. The kind of address that tells you before you walk through the door that whoever called this meeting is not wasting your time. That was intentional. The Crillon wasn't a detail, it was an argument. All 5 dealers came. Lustig met them in a private salon, dressed in the quiet authority of a senior government official, not flashy, precise. He introduced himself as the Deputy Director General of the Ministry. He thanked them for their discretion in coming, and then he told them something they were not expecting to hear. The city of Paris, he explained gravely, had made a difficult decision. The Eiffel Tower, beloved as it was, had become an unsustainable burden. The maintenance costs were extraordinary. The structure was aging. After careful deliberation, the government had concluded that the tower would need to be demolished and its iron sold for scrap. The decision had already been made at the highest levels. See, the reason this meeting was confidential, he stressed, was that public announcement would be premature. The city was concerned about the reaction. Parisians had complicated feelings about the tower. They'd hated it when it went up and had since grown attached to it. The government wished to handle this quietly, professionally, with the right partners. Partners they had personally selected for their honesty and their standing in the business community. Every man in that room straightened his back slightly. He had just been told he was one of 5 honest men in Paris. 2 days later, Lustig took all 5 dealers on a private tour of the tower. His forged access card bypassed the queues, bypassed the attendants. They rode up to the 3rd platform. Lustig gestured at the ironwork around them, at the rivets, the beams, the thousands of interlocking pieces, and talked about it the way a man talks about an inheritance, with a mixture of pride and regret. In those 2 days, he had been watching all 5 of them, reading them, and one had already told him everything he needed to know simply by the way he moved. André Poisson was not from Paris. He was a businessman from the provinces who had made enough money to operate in the capital and not quite enough confidence to feel he belonged there. He watched the other dealers when they spoke. He agreed a half-second too quickly. He dressed well but slightly wrong, the way men dress when they're performing a version of themselves they haven't fully inhabited yet. He wanted this deal, not because of the money, though the money was significant. He wanted it because landing a deal like this, in Paris, with a ministry official would mean he had arrived, that he was real. Victor Lustig had sold things to greedy men and scared men and bored men, but there was a particular kind of vulnerability in a man who needed to be seen as legitimate. It was a hunger that bypassed logic entirely. He asked Poisson to stay behind after the other dealers left. In the private meeting that followed, Lustig's expression shifted, not dramatically, just enough. He became slightly more human, slightly more tired, a man dropping a small pretense. He told Poisson quietly that his government salary, while respectable, was not quite sufficient for the lifestyle that his position demanded, that there were certain costs that his official position required him to manage. He let the implication land without spelling it out. He was asking for a bribe. This is the moment that should have ended everything. A man who wants your money telling you he's corrupt. It should have been the alarm. But Poisson didn't hear an alarm. He heard something else entirely. He heard, this is how real deals actually work. He heard, I'm trusting you with something that could ruin me. He heard, this is so honest it has to be legitimate. Because if this man were a criminal, why would he admit to being one? The logic was inverted. The confession was the con. The money changed hands, approximately 70,000 francs, covering both the purchase and the bribe. Poisson handed it over with the quiet satisfaction of a man who has just been allowed into a room most people never enter. Lustig shook his hand warmly. He promised the paperwork would follow within the week. He walked out of the hotel into the Paris afternoon and did not slow down. Within hours, he and his accomplice had crossed the border into Austria. The money was divided and secured, and then they waited. Not for the police, for the newspapers. This was the real gamble, and it was not a blind one. Lustig understood something about men like André Poisson that most people never articulate. The greatest weapon available to a con man is not cleverness, it is shame. Poisson had not simply been robbed, he had been made to look foolish in front of himself. He had handed over 70,000 francs for the Eiffel Tower. To report that to the police was to report it to his wife, his partners, his rivals, his social circle. It was to become the man who tried to buy the Eiffel Tower. That story would follow him forever. Lustig waited in Austria and read the papers every morning. Day after day, nothing. No arrest notice. No breathless headline, no international manhunt, silence. Poisson had done exactly what Lustig knew he would do. He had buried it. He had paid his tuition, swallowed the humiliation alone, and said nothing. Weeks passed, then months, nothing. Lustig looked at his accomplice and made a decision that was either the most arrogant move in the history of confidence crime or the most logical one. He went back to Paris. He identified 5 new scrap metal dealers. He produced new stationery. He booked the Crillon again. He ran the same con, identically, on an entirely new group of men. It nearly worked exactly the same way. He found his mark, secured the deal, received the money. But this time the mark went to the police. Perhaps the humiliation was less than the outrage. Perhaps he had a wife who found out and gave him no choice. Whatever the reason, the story broke. The newspapers ran it. The world learned that someone had just sold the Eiffel Tower. By that time, Victor Lustig was already on a ship heading west. He left Europe and never returned. He was not worried. He was already thinking about America. The United States in the 20s and 30s was an extraordinary place for a man of Lustig's gifts. It was large enough to disappear in, wealthy enough to provide targets in every city, and populated by a particular kind of ambition that was almost professionally designed to be exploited. He crossed the country running the Romanian box. Always a new city, always a new suit, always a new mark who was absolutely certain he could keep a secret worth $20,000. The move that tells you everything about Victor Lustig is the one he pulled on Al Capone. He walked into a meeting with Alphonse Capone and pitched him a deal. An investment opportunity, convincingly vague, attractively profitable. Capone had $50,000 placed in Lustig's hands. Lustig held it for 2 months. He did nothing with it. He simply held it. "We howays, all you gam, we howays." Then he came back to Capone, looked him in the eye, and told him the deal had fallen through. He returned every dollar. He told Capone he was sorry, that he'd tried his best, that it just hadn't come together. Capone looked at him for a long moment. A man who returned money when he could have simply run, and would have been hard to catch even if he had, was either an idiot or a man with genuine principles. Either way, he deserved something. Capone gave him $1,000 as a thank you for his honesty. That was the plan, the entire plan. From the beginning, Lustig had never intended to invest Capone's money. He had intended to borrow it, return it, and collect a tip from the most dangerous man in America without the danger. It was the most controlled burn in the history of cons. He'd walked into Capone's orbit and walked out with $1,000 and a favor he'd never need to call in. The recklessness, when it came, was almost surprising. On December 11, 1928, Lustig stole $16,000 in cash from a drawer in a businessman's home in Massachusetts. No elaborate setup, no forged stationery, just theft, blunt and clumsy. It was the kind of move that suggests a man who has been operating at the edge of his own daring for so long that the edge starts to blur. The counterfeit operation that followed was on a different scale entirely. Lustig had always drifted near forgery, the Romanian box, the fake government documents, but what he built in the early 1930s was something else. A serious coordinated production ring turning out fake American currency in volume large enough to disturb the treasury. The Secret Service began tracking the operation. They tracked the operation to him. On May 10, 1935, a Secret Service agent named Peter Rubano, who had been hunting Victor Lustig for years with the patience of a man who understood he was chasing someone extraordinary, arrested him in New York City. The chase was over. Except that it wasn't. On September 1, 1935, the Sunday before Labor Day, Victor Lustig escaped from the Federal Detention Center in Manhattan, an institution described by the people who built it as inescapable. He had spent weeks preparing. He cut through his cell bars. He braided a rope from bed sheets. He lowered himself out of a window, hand over hand, stories above the street. When pedestrians on the pavement below looked up and saw him, he reached into his shirt, produced a cloth, and began to wipe the window frame with the slow, bored efficiency of a man doing his job. They walked on. When he reached the ground, he walked away. He left a note on his pillow, a handwritten quote from Victor Hugo's Les Miserables. He was free for 27 days. Federal agents found him, cornered him, and when he tried to drive away, they rammed his vehicle on the street. He was dragged from the car and placed in handcuffs. He's reported to have been perfectly composed, as though even this moment was something he had accounted for in advance. At sentencing in November 1935, the court handed him 20 years at Alcatraz. As they let him out, a Secret Service agent looked at him and said, "Count, you're the smoothest con man that ever lived." Lustig didn't respond. He had nothing left to sell. He arrived on the island in the winter of 1935, and he never left it alive. On March 11, 1947, Victor Lustig died of pneumonia on Alcatraz. He was 57 years old. The paperwork was filed, the boxes were checked, the government recorded what they knew of the deceased, his name, his dates, his cause of death. Under occupation, someone typed a single word: salesman. It is tempting to call Victor Lustig a genius. He was, almost certainly. 5 languages, 45 aliases, a mind that processed human psychology the way an engineer processes load-bearing calculations, precisely, structurally, without sentiment. He saw what people wanted to believe and he gave it to them at a price. He sold vanity and status hunger and the desire to be chosen. He didn't steal money so much as he rented it from people's wishful thinking. But the thing that endures about the Eiffel Tower con isn't the audacity of what he attempted. It's that he was right about the human beings involved. Poisson didn't go to the police. He protected his own dignity above everything else. Lustig's second victim did report it, and even then, the story people remembered was the con, not the criminal. They marveled at the idea. They still do. A scam works because selling someone the Eiffel Tower is not really about the iron and the rivets. It's about making a person believe they are special enough to receive an offer the rest of the world doesn't know about, that they have been selected, seen, chosen. Victor Lustig understood that the deepest need in a certain kind of person is not wealth, it's validation. And validation, it turns out, has a price you can name. He named it 70,000 francs, twice. The death certificate said salesman. He wasn't wrong.